Hey everybody, welcome to Professor Long's Lectures in Anatomy and Physiology. I'm Professor Bob Long. If you're watching these videos, know that they're intended for my students. If you're in my class, learn what I cover. If you're in someone else's class, there may be additional structures covered. Some structures that I cover may be left off. So please learn what your instructor wants you to know. And please hit like and subscribe. Now today we're covering some muscles of what we call the breastplate, which would be the front of the body. This is the breastplate of one of our 3/4 size mannequins. And there's muscles on the front and on the posterior aspect of the breastplate. Now, seeing them on the model alone is not always super easy, so I like to do this drawing to explain it to my students, and then we'll go see it on the model, and hopefully you'll be able to make sense of it. So, I'm going to draw some landmarks here. We have our sternum, which would have a structure called the manubrium, and the manubrium is shaped something like a stop sign. And then we have the body of the sternum, and then we have the xiphoid process. Now down here, we would have the pubic bones and our hips, and we would have the pubic symphysis holding them together, and somewhere along the line would be your umbilicus or belly button. Now because we don't have a lot of bone structure here, oh by the way, let me put some ribs in here, like this. I'm only going to put a few ribs for reference. And they're not even drawn quite accurately as far as scale size, but I'm just trying to give you the impression here of what we're talking about, okay? Now, actually, I'm not even going to draw these on, well, I will. I'll leave them up. No. So, one of the things that happens on the anterior part of the body is there's not a lot of other bony structures to grab onto here. So in order for these muscles to attach and pull and help move us, Mother Nature put a long piece of connective tissue here that goes around the umbilicus and attaches to our pubic symphysis. This is not a muscular structure, it is a piece of connective tissue. And this structure right here, I'm going to create a little key. Actually, I'm just going to draw the lines. This is called the Linea Alba. Linea means line and alba means white, and it makes the white line. And by the way, when females get pregnant, some females, when you get hypersecretion of pigments, that line will turn black and you'll see a very dark line. They refer to it as a linea negra, but it was originally the Linea Alba. Now, there's a large muscle that covers most of, it attaches here from the sternum all the way over to the upper part of the humerus. And the muscle fibers will do this. This muscle is known as the Pectoralis Major. And on our models, if you see this here, you can see the Pectoralis Major and the Linea Alba running down here. On the other side of this model, they have cut and reflected the Pectoralis Major, and you can see the ribs, you can see the muscles between the ribs, and then you have this muscle here. So there is a muscle that comes down on this side and actually has attachments to the ribs. And this muscle is called the pectoralis minor. It's a very thick muscle that eventually branches off here. That's called the pectoralis minor. Now in between the ribs, we have some muscle fibers that are going to run medially upwards and outwards, and some that run from lateral to up and in. If the muscle fibers run up and in here, let me use these colors. If the muscle fibers are running up and in between the ribs, then those muscles are called the internal intercostals. If the muscle fibers are running out from between the ribs up and out here, and some of them will run underneath the pectoralis minor, those are called the external intercostals. So when I'm looking at this breastplate model, what I should be able to see is the pectoralis major, the pectoralis minor, and then I'm going to try to give you a close-up of this, but there's some muscle fibers that run up and in here, we call the internal intercostals, and some running out called the external intercostals. And then we have this long piece of connective tissue called the Linea Alba. Now, when it comes to our abdomen, our guts have a lot of weight and they tend to sag out, which you see on my belly when I'm standing. I actually have a massive tear in a lot of my abdominal muscles, so I can't strengthen my abs. If I would strengthen them, then they would hold my guts in. But I can't. There's 4 layers of muscle tissue here that all have the term abdominal or abdominis in the names, okay? And they're stacked kind of this way. There's one that sits on the outside, there's some that run up and in, up and out, and then there's one that runs straight across. They're called the rectus abdominis, the internal obliques, the external obliques, and then there's the transverse abdominis. And they're all kind of sandwiched in here in a funky way. So let me show you something. The rectus abdominis muscles are broken into several groups that have some little tendons running across here. And people refer to this as the 6-pack, but it's really an 8-pack. And these muscle fibers would be running this way. This whole set of fibers running vertically here, and there would be some on this side doing the exact same thing. All of this muscle is called the rectus abdominis. Okay? Now, there's some muscles that actually sit kind of outside of that, and the muscle fibers run up and out. If the muscle fibers run up and out, they are external, going out. And so when I look at the model, on our mannequins, this model should be on both sides, or this muscle should be on both sides of the model. But then we wouldn't see the other layer of muscles, so they've cut and reflected it. But I do have some muscle fibers that are going to be running about from the edge of the rectus abdominis, and the muscle fibers will run like this. And that muscle, this whole set of muscle here, would be called the external obliques, or also called the external abdominal oblique. Now those muscle fibers stop right at the edge of the rectus abdominis, but then they have a piece of connective tissue that connects over this, and that is called the rectus sheath. Let me show you on the model real quick. You can see here the rectus abdominis muscle on this side is nice and clear, but this side has a white film. That white film would be the rectus sheath, which is connected to this external oblique over here. The fibers run up and out, external oblique. On this side, the external oblique and that rectus sheath have been cut and reflected. What that shows is another muscle fiber that runs underneath the rectus abdominis and attaches to the backside of the linea alba. If the muscle fibers run up and in this direction, then those would be called the internal obliques, also called the internal abdominal obliques. So when we're doing ab exercises, crunches will get the rectus abdominis, and then when you do these twisting crunches, that would get your obliques. Now, again, people will confuse this muscle and this muscle as the same one, but they stop at the rectus sheath, at the linea alba. The internal obliques would run up and in, and the external obliques would run up and out. And then finally, I'm going to have to erase part of this. We have the pectoralis major labeled. There is another muscle that sits over here, and that muscle fibers will start to insert between the fibers of the external obliques, and that one is called the serratus anterior. And if there's an anterior, there's going to be a posterior, but the posterior is not on our list. So again, over here I see the external obliques, but then I see these muscles that look like they have little teeth called the serratus anterior, and this side shows it better. Where the external obliques have been removed, the serratus anterior muscles actually attach to your ribs and help lift your ribs as we breathe. So this would be the serratus anterior on either side. Finally, there's one more muscle that we cannot see. I'm not going to draw it on here. I'm just going to flip this thing over. And there's a muscle that runs all the way across with this connective tissue in here. But this muscle that's running across would be called the transverse abdominis. So this drawing gives you a pretty good idea of all the muscles that we're talking about. when it comes to the breastplate. We have the Pectoralis Major, the Pectoralis Minor. The internal intercostals run up and in between the ribs. The external intercostals run up and out between the ribs. I have the Linea Alba with the Rectus Abdominis, external oblique or external abdominal oblique. I have the internal abdominal oblique over on this side, which would also be over here, but it's underneath. And then I have the transverse abdominis running across. On either side, I see the serratus anterior. I'm going to show you these muscles possibly in another video with a close-up with the little mannequin. So for now, that should cover everything. Thanks for watching. I hope you had as much fun as I did. I'll see you in the next video.